What do a speaking coach, a strategy consultant, and a jazz pianist have in common? Sounds like the start of a bad joke, right? But honestly, it's all about finding out what people really do in their jobs. The stories, the struggles, the coffee breaks. The real stuff you won't get in a job title.
Welcome to a space where we sit down with people from all kinds of careers, have a laugh, and dive into what makes their work meaningful. Whether you're looking to learn something new or just here for a good story, let us be your guide. I'm Jeff.
And I'm Charlie.
And let's get casually
pro.
Yay! Today we are here with Andreas Dittinger. Andy, I met you last year in Frankfurt. You were giving a TED Talk on how to prepare to be unprepared, a jazz musician's approach. So you're a jazz musician who practices improvisation. It stood out in two different ways. That's why I found it to be, it's a secret between us, the best TED Talk of the event. Because it stood out with the content. Your content was inspiring and it resonated with me. And you also stood out with the style. To give a glimpse, Andy was playing while doing his talk on improvisation. Andy, we are very happy to be here with you. Can you please start by giving us a quick introduction on who are you and what you're doing as a jazz musician?
Certainly. Hey, Jeff. Hey, Charlie. It's a pleasure to be here. Really looking forward to the next 45 minutes or so. Yeah. So I'm a jazz pianist by profession. That means I went to music university, studied jazz piano, and my job, among others, is to play concerts, right? I play concerts, I write music, meaning I compose, I arrange music for other artists, for example. So that is the artist side that I'm taking care of. And at the same time, I work in academia. So I run an international jazz program and I teach piano at the Music University in Frankfurt.
Incredible. I have such respect for jazz musicians because in my personal experience, it was always the hardest genre to even enter as opposed to master. I don't think anyone really truly masters jazz until they get to a very, very high level of music understanding. But the thing that always just inspired me about jazz musicians is their ability to improvise. I think you have a unique position because you are not just doing the improvisation, you are teaching people how to do it. Could you maybe talk to us a little bit about the more education side of teaching jazz?
Yeah, that's right. Generally speaking, I think what I try to do with my students is I don't want to make the environment in the classroom a one-way street, right? Because especially with the kind of music we're talking about, it's just not. There's room for inspiration from both sides. So in jazz, there is certain norms, right? A certain tradition that evolved over time. And these are, if you will, the rules that lie underneath improvisation. And it's my job to teach people how to do that, right? But what I want from them is I want them to think about the rules once they've figured out what they are and actually ask themselves, man, do I want to follow these rules or not? Do I want to do something completely different? Is this actually what I like? Right? And I want to inspire them to not do this in a vacuum, right? They need to know the tradition. They need to be able to execute it the way it's been done for a while. But at the same time, I think our job as educators in this field is to empower the people to say, no, let's fuck that. I want to do something completely different. I want to push the boundaries, right? And I know that this note is not supposed to be here, but I want to play it. You know?
So
I love this
kind of,
approach. Like, let's screw the rules.
well, no, it's more than that, right? Because it's learn the rules to break them.
Yeah, first you have to learn them, right?
That's right.
So, Andy, there is a quick question that I always wondered. Do any good piano player know from scratch how to improvise, or is it something that they have to practice a lot by themselves before they can do whatever's coming out on stage?
Well, I think this is definitely a skill that everybody can learn. And I'm not sure if people are just born this way, right? There might be one or the other prodigy out there. But for us normal humans, it is definitely something we can develop. And I see improvisation as a twofold vehicle, right? So on the one side, what I need to practice and what I need to learn is the material. So in music, this could be my chords, my scales, my music theory, my technical abilities on the instrument, all that. So I need to know what to play when. But at the same time, what I need to develop in order to be a true improviser is a mindset, right? So it's much more than just focusing on the music. So maybe to get back to your question is if people are born this way, I guess a certain mentality helps. Although I don't want to say that this mentality cannot be developed. But it's not only about the music side of things. It's much more than that. It's also about the, yeah, mindset, getting out there, trying something out, failing, trying again, failing again, so it's all about this. Yeah.
Well, music is such a kind of a nebulous expression of the human condition that I think there's something to be said about different types of personalities, different types of ways of thinking that approach one particular area. I'm always fascinated with how many ways can you play the same song and it sounds completely different each time you add an accent, you add a silence, you add something that is out of the ordinary. And I think that is just kind of how people work in general, right? I guess with that being said, is there a particular kind of mindset that you find people coming into jazz or just music in general have that makes them slightly more successful or even gives them a leg up in the process of learning the rules to break the rules?
Honestly, I think playfulness is one of them, right? It's this quest to experience something new and to find a different path and having fun while I'm doing it, right? So I've just found that when people, have fun doing it and want to try different things and want to try to find a new path and want to get out there and just enjoy themselves on the way, I think this really, really helps to navigate this complex material, right? You said it. It's really complex material we're dealing with. So yeah, being playful certainly helps.
I imagine when you were talking a bit earlier about the mindset, you were also referring to the fact that it can be really hard to go out there and to improvise because you put something that's coming out of yourself without having the time to filter if it's good or not. You don't have this, yeah, let's just practice it a little bit, and when I like it, I will show it to the audience. When you are in improvisation, and I practice it as a speaking coach, doing impromptu speeches, and it's always so scary to remove the filters because you can get completely crazy without even having prepared it, just because you feel it in the moment. You probably have something like this when you practice jazz improv, Andy. And point I wanted to ask you was, of course, it was scary when you did it the first times. Now that you have all this experience, is it still as scary?
Still super scary.
Oh yeah.
I don't think it's ever going away. You know, there's instances where it's less scary, and then there's instances where it's more scary. And it has a lot to do with who's sitting in the audience, and you know, how big is the audience? How well do I know the material? Do I know the other players and all that? So it can be still scary. And I think that's great, right? Because that's what keeps all of us on our toes. And then the question is, am I still gonna do it or not? And the question is, what am I gonna do with this feeling? Am I gonna um just collapse and not put myself out there, or am I going to use this and be like, no, this is great, let's do it. um but honestly, I am very curious. I think this is very interesting to compare this public speaking world to the music improvisation world, and I am curious, how do you get people to get through that filter when you teach them to speak publicly?
Putting Jeff on the hot seat. I like it.
It's very hard. It's really hard because you cannot go on stage with them. You can prepare them. You can put them in the situation in one-on-one setting where they, but the step of going on stage in front of people and just giving what you have inside you, and when it's done properly, it is something that is deeply personal. Sometimes you talk about your deepest fears. Sometimes you talk about ideas that you didn't even have time to fully process before you put them out. So it's hard, and the best way I have to do it is by telling them that it's an exercise that is also supposed to show them what it is to be vulnerable in front of people. That the purpose of the exercise is to overcome the fear of what might come out, and the fear that how they will be perceived by the people in the audience. That's the, I think that's the most important point, is that the only thing that is an obstacle between you improvising like this is the fear of how you're being perceived. So if you vocalize this fear, if you not try to ignore it, you're not trying to do as if it was not here, but you say, look, this is the enemy. It's that you would like to be perceived as smart, nice, competent. And the purpose of the exercise is to remove it. I think this is the best we can do. But then cannot push them. So
I think
sometimes it takes a few tries.
What I think is really interesting is that judgment, or the fear of judgment from the audience, is one thing, and sometimes even worse is the fear of your own judgment.
Oh,
If there's no audience, right? And that can be tough too. And you know, one of the critical things that any jazz musician needs to do in order to advance is you need to record yourself. And then you need to listen back. And then you need to be your own critic. And oh boy, that is one tough process if you're doing that every day for hours and hours, right? Because then you're going to look at everything you ever played, and then you'll be like, no, this was shit. Let's do it again. Right? So in my experience, in addition to what you're saying, what's also really important is to get off that own judgment on stage in that moment of playing. That you're getting rid of this, I should play this and that, or I should have played this and that, or that you're not even supposed to tell yourself, man, that was good, because you have no idea, right? We need to improvise on stage out of a moment of bliss and flow And if we judge in that moment, then that is not real improvisation, because then we're in our heads. And interestingly enough, we met at the TED Talk, right? Interestingly enough, the TED Talk was one of those moments for me where I experienced this flow on stage. There was no thinking. There was no time for judgment. And that is the greatest gift for anybody on stage or any artist.
That's incredible. I constantly think of myself in a position of building flow for people because it is incredibly difficult to match something that you are deathly afraid of or that you hate to something that you have to feel ecstatic about to be competent, if not excellent at what you're doing. But I think for at least myself, I can only speak of, there was a moment in my career where I identified that I wanted to feel that moment of joy more than I was afraid of that fear of disillusionment or pain. And that's the moment that most professionals kind of figure out, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I'm so curious to hear about, because you are so deep into not just the actual playing of jazz, but the structural, educational component of it. What made you fall in love with jazz to the point where you made it your entire life, and then you took it and broke it apart and turned it into something that you can apply to much more than just music?
I remember that back in the days when I went to high school, we had a big band there. And I think the first time I played in this big band was the first time when I was part of this, I was part of this 20 people band with this incredibly loud sound. And it wasn't probably particularly good, but it was very loud. And it was very, very impressive. And I remember how that felt, right? To be in this, I used to play saxophone back then. So it was a saxophone section. And to be in that saxophone section, we were all playing the same notes and trying to get it right. And it was so what did that for me was this like group feeling of being in a group, of relying on each other, of, just being part of something bigger, I guess. Now, that you can have also in an orchestra, in a classical orchestra. And what made the difference in jazz for me is certainly the freedom, right? Exactly what you said before, that whenever I approach a tune, I have the liberty to play it completely different than what I did yesterday or the day before or the day before that. And I can shock people. I can heal people. I can, create something that has never been there before. And it might not always be pretty. Sometimes it's actually really bad, and that's okay. And that's part of the process too. But it feels very alive. I guess that's what I'm saying. It feels extremely alive.
Wow, that's incredible. I want to touch on something really important because I think so many people gloss over this when they think about working in music, particularly being part of a band or being part of a choir or any kind of musical group in general. There is a tremendous amount of trust that you place in each other when you work as a musical performer, not just in yourself, obviously, but in the other musicians. That sense of cohesion, that sense of, okay, we're doing this together. And it is even more so, in my opinion, when you are leaning into improvisation, because no longer is it the notes on a sheet. It is, I'm trusting you to take this piece that we artfully crafted up until this point and add something that makes it unique. Can you talk to us about how maybe as a musician, or even as an educator, how you help develop that trust between musicians?
What's really interesting in what you're saying is that one of the major differences probably between a pop band and a jazz band is the fact that a lot of pop bands stay together. They have the same members a lot of the times, right? And I'm not talking about, a front man and then the sidekicks or something, but about real bands. The Beatles used to be a band for whatever long. And that happens in jazz as well. But at the same time, jazz musicians much more get out there and play with different people, different peers. And they might also get together for only one project, or they might get together for only one night. And what's particularly interesting is if you get called for a gig, you might not know anybody on stage and you might not even rehearse. And the fact that you might not rehearse has might be related to time and money issues, but not only, it might also be related to the fact that sometimes we want this freshness on stage, right? We want to figure it out on stage, and we want the audience to be a part of our struggle while we figure it out on stage, because that again makes this kind of music so human. So getting back to your question about the trust, I find that this is one of the examples where that actually requires a whole lot of trust, since you might even not even know the people, you might not even know the material. And I think one of the reasons why professional jazz musicians can't trust each other in that is because they see the love for the music and the material in each other, right? Being a jazz musician is not a job. It's not something that I do to earn money and then I go home at 5 o'clock and then I, watch TV. It can only exist out of innate passion for whatever I'm doing. And I think when you get together with jazz musicians who mirror this passion, then you're in good hands.
That's powerful.
Wow, it must be amazing to have those improvisation conversations with fellow players that you never met before. At least when you told about it, it seemed to be the image that I had was a conversation between the people, a musical conversation. And I'd like also to rebound on what you briefly said, the passion and the money. How does it work in the jazz scene?
Well, I guess in a lot of industries, passion is inverse to money, as it is in the jazz world. So obviously, nobody's really in it for the money. In fact, the socioeconomic situation of jazz musicians is probably worse than a lot of people think. It is extremely difficult to make a career out of it. Jazz musicians are, I think if I remember correctly, are 3 times more likely to develop depression and anxiety than the general population. There's a study by the German Jazz Union that shows that 85% of the jazz musicians in Germany live at a taxable income of below 20,000 euros. A third of the jazz musicians even below 10K. And it doesn't come as a surprise, right? That out of this economic pressure and combined with the crazy working hours, playing in a club at night, with a touring schedule, with being away from home, with having a very full summer, but not a very full winter, maybe, because it's a seasonal business, right? Obviously, this is going to take a toll on the people. So yeah, the economic situation isn't great.
That is, in my personal opinion, a travesty. But it's quite understandable when you look at the nature of people that enjoy jazz. And see, the way I see it is there are very few people who are comfortable with the uncomfortable. We can talk about how people would rather die than public speak. We can talk about how people hate the idea of eating something that is still alive, right? There are all sorts of different and unique experiences that come out of exploring the unknown. And I think part of the wonder of jazz is it's never the same. You'll hear a recording and you'll hear something that is captured in a moment of time, but the experience of hearing it live from venue to venue, group to group, never quite matches what you expect. At least as a traditional enjoyer of, more solidified genres. And so when you don't know how to proceed and how to expect it, I think most people get a sense of unease, right? And then conversely, there's always going to be a side that is more geared towards, I don't want to call it like corporate listening, but everyone knows elevator music. Everyone knows the sweet dulcet tones of a sax played over kitschy little jazz keys, but it's not jazz, or at least not in my personal opinion. So all of that is just a fancy way of saying it's a horrible reality, but the reality makes sense when you look at people's unease with change. And I'd love to talk to you about how you embrace change in your personal career, in your personal, travels with music in groups. It must be frustrating to see other people maybe not understand why you're doing what you do, or have a misconception over what level of change needs to happen within your own kind of musical journey for you to feel that level of satisfaction of being a jazz musician. Talk to me about how you manage change.
Well, let's zoom out for a second, okay? So if I look at change in my life on a broader level, I think, and this might be related to my affinity for jazz music. I embrace change a lot. The biggest example being probably that after high school, so I come from a southern German village. Went to high school there, did the right thing to do, which is get decent grades, go to business school, studied in Germany, moved to the US, studied there, worked in business for a bit, graduated, and then I didn't want to do the right thing anymore. So I pivoted. And that was probably one of the biggest changes in my life. So I realized that this is not what I wanted to do at that point. And then I told myself, okay, let's get out of here. Let's change something. And I went traveling through Latin America for 9 months with the backpack, met a lot of inspiring people there, had a lot of fun, but also had a lot of realizations how life can look like, other than the norm, I guess. And then I went back and set out to study jazz piano. So that was probably one of the biggest changes in my life, and I'm extremely happy that I took that change. So to me, change always, I'm scared of change as well, right? I am. And the bigger the change, the scarier it feels. And at the same time, I try to think back to whatever I did then, and the fact that it turned out well for me. Yeah, to still go through with it, I guess.
Embrace change and be comfortable with the fact that you can't stay where you are forever.
And that you probably can't know where this change might take you. So, and that's another jazz principle, by the way, right? Take that first step. Also, if you don't know what the next step after that is going to be. But if it doesn't make you happy where you are, I guess it's always a good idea to just go somewhere, and then you can take it from there. And you know how many times I didn't feel ready to play a gig, especially back in the days, right? But then you still do it, and then you figure it out along the way. And I think this is a good this is a good little brother of change, right? That attitude that it's gonna turn out somehow.
You know what's fascinating, and I think not a lot of people talk about it, is that there are so many motivators for change, right? Uh, Someone like myself, I wasn't satisfied with my career because I wanted to do more than just find problems. I started my career as an accountant and then slowly evolved into a consultant, which slowly evolved into a strategy consultant. It's just the continuum of, uh, okay, find a problem, fix a problem, find out why it has to be a problem in the first place, right? But then there's someone like Jeff who loved being a developer, really enjoyed working with tech, but he also recognized that there is a skill set that would make my life easier to know about and learn about and develop. And so I think you hit the nail on the head with the idea that if you are not happy with where you are, even if the outcome might dip a little further down before you ride the roller coaster up, change is an incredibly powerful tool for anyone's life. You know, I always say that the most beautiful thing about human beings is our capability to change. No other animal or you know, I guess thing in existence has that capability outside of just going from one form to another, but we can be entirely different people than we were yesterday. Now, I want to kind of delve back into one particular area. Why do you talk about the act of improvisation in such a unique way as to make it kind of the forefront of your education, right? I think it's very easy for any kind of music teacher in general to focus on principle. And I think you do that as well, but you have a particular love of innovation, it seems like. Or I shouldn't say innovation, improvisation within innovation, right? Can you talk to us about where you see improvisation more actively outside of music and how it's affected your want to kind of bring that to the forefront of other people in something like your TED Talk?
Yeah, let's take a step back and look at university real quick for a second, right? In the educating world. Sometimes I get students who have not had a lot of exposure to improvisation in music, right? And they're scared of trying out something new or playing notes that are not written on the sheet music. And the moment they let go of this need to know, it is beautiful what happens, and it really changes them. You know, I really, if I see these people over the course of a semester, a second semester, a third semester, a fourth semester, right? And the way they play, but also the way they think about music, the way they interact with music, the way they interact with others in the framework of music. Yeah. The way they approach it. Maybe they might even start composing stuff because, hey, cool, that's improvising, but just writing it down. Right. So it empowers them and it does have an effect on their personality. Now, I don't know if it's the hen or the egg, right? So whatever comes first. But it has an interaction with that. And for the TED Talk, or generally speaking about improvisation, I just know that seeing myself as an improviser in life has had a tremendous impact on me and has has also brought me a couple of problems probably, but it's brought me to a couple of places where I had no idea that I'd ever be, right? That I'd ever experienced this or that I'd ever that I'd ever be this way, right? And I think that's great. And I really just think that, in our society, a lot of what we do is dictated by, well, rules, and they're there for a reason, but then it's also societal rules, right? Or expectations from whoever it might be. And I just think that a little bit of more improvisation in your daily life can have a huge impact. You know, it just changes things up. It just helps you think differently. And I know because it did for me. It did for me when I changed from the business world to the more creative side of music.
Yeah, 100% with you on this, Andy. The way I like to see it is that everything that you do for the first time is an improvisation.
Totally.
If you see someone
Yeah.
you don't know and start a conversation with this person, it's going to be an improvisation. If you go
Yeah.
to a new place you never been, improvisation.
Yeah.
If you make
And
a call,
and
yes.
I think that has a lot of, at least for me, that has a lot to do with availability, right? So when are you going to approach this person for the first time? That probably means that you walking through life with an with a mindset of availability. You are available to whatever comes at you. You are listening to your surroundings. You are present. You know? Yeah, but you're absolutely right.
And there was a part in your TED talk that I remember very vividly where you spoke about mistakes. What should I do if I talk to someone, if I do something while in a improvisation way, and suddenly I realize I made a mistake?
I think it depends a lot on context, right? There might be mistakes that you might want to apologize for. And in that case, might be a real mistake. So I don't want to give general advice here, but let's just, for the sake of the argument, let's make an example. So let's say you blabbered out something that you did not want to blabber out, right? Let's say you wanted to keep this a secret, but it just came out that was your mistake, if you will. What if you built on it, right? What if you see whatever that might do? So you might have said something that was a secret for you, that you were actually you felt too vulnerable to share, but you did share it. So you opened something up, and that in case might completely turn the conversation around into something beautiful. Yeah. So what I suggest is, at least that's what we do in jazz. We try to embrace whatever we just did that sounded like a mistake, but we try to build on it. It's not the end of the world. Try to make something out of this. Yeah. And sometimes it can even help to point out that you deemed what just happened was a mistake, and then maybe two people can laugh about it. But I guess the whole point is here that possibly it wasn't really a mistake, right? That's maybe just something you thought, or that might have just been the label you gave it.
It seems like such a unique tenet of art to make something that others would consider a mistake, an accidental brush on a canvas, a note where it wasn't supposed to be, and stop and think, but what if it makes my piece unique? What if it makes it something special that no one else could do? Or even, what if it adds something that in my thought process or my process of action, could not have naturally done because of creating that box to fit inside? Everyone should have a creative side attached to their problem making and decision making, because realistically, I mean, even if it's just for your own mental health, you will always make mistakes. You will always figure out the not correct way to do something. But if you have the foresight to kind of maneuver that into, okay, either this is going to be an incredible opportunity for me to do something different or just a great lesson to learn on not doing it next time. That is an invaluable mindset to have for anyone, I think, even people who aren't necessarily highly creative. If you had to pick a skill to kind of say, this is what I built my fundamental education platform, or my fundamental music platform, or my fundamental speaking platform on, what skill would you say that is?
Yeah, I think you guys are right. I think I think it is literally the I think that's where making mistakes comes in, yeah? I think that's exactly it. I think it's, going forward, trying out something, getting real-time feedback, because that's what trying out means, and then reiterating. And I think the worst thing one could do is, to get stuck and just not do anything. So this thought that there are no mistakes, only opportunities to explore. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Because how do I calibrate my mindset to be okay to make mistakes, right? A lot of times in our conversation right now, we have talked about accidental mistakes and maybe something that just happened along the way. But how do I get to a point where it comes natural to me to make a mistake? Because that means that I tried something in the first place. And I think if I had to pinpoint one skill or one attitude, then that's the one.
At the end, it's the process of improvement. You do something, you get feedback, and you improve. If it's good, you might keep it. And if it doesn't feel good enough, you just drop it and you try something else, and then you iterate. That's the feedback loop. Nice.
I mean, and exactly. And, a lot of people also say that mistakes are necessarily a part of this, right? So you've touched upon that quickly. And I think you're absolutely right that those are just opportunities to learn something. And there's this really famous quote by Miles Davis, who is one of the biggest jazz heroes that ever lived. And he said, the only mistake you can make is to not make a mistake. Because that means you didn't really try, right? That's what he said.
I completely agree. And it's something that I use a lot also. That if you don't make mistakes, how can you know where the boundaries are if you never cross them? If you never make a mistake, you're just in a box. And you have no idea how farther the box can go because you don't know where the boundary is.
Completely. And in education, for me, this means, so with a lot of students, when we practice improvisation, we have a fuck up chorus. So that means that whatever is going to happen in the next chorus, I don't care, but get yourself out there. And then it's really funny how much students want to keep from what they played in that chorus, because that's when things get real, right?
Wow. That's such a cool concept, because I think so many people can say, oh, this was my favorite moment of whatever I performed or whatever I did. But I think very, very few people can say, this is my favorite mistake. This is my favorite accident.
What chorus do you think is the most fun? And if you're a performer, what do you think is going to happen when you're having fun? What do you think is going to happen with the audience, right? So there's this great story about Ella Fitzgerald, right? One of the great singers that ever lived, and she played this this live version of Mac the Knife, a classic jazz tune, and in the middle of the song, she just forgot the lyrics. So she started to make lyrics up that are pretty funny, actually. And she also manages that they rhyme. And so it's a live recording. So when the song ends, the applause, like the people are freaking out. They think it's so awesome what she did, right? And that record got her 2 Grammys later. So she really, really embraced it. And she was like, man, yeah, this is happening. Cool. So what can I do with this? And then she had fun. And this sense of enjoyment captured the audience as well because they were part of something bigger. Yeah.
I think it's a very unique situation where being authentic doesn't work. I have yet to come across it, and I'm the kind of person that says never say never. So I'm sure somewhere out there that's a unique situation. But I think when you are specifically dealing with people, with a form of communication, and really that's what music is. It's a way to tell a story without words necessarily. There is such a liberating moment when you can say, you know what? Yeah, I fucked up. I messed up, but I own it and I like it. And this is something new. Maybe you'll like it too. At the very least, you know that I'm also human. This is not a recording. This is a live session, right? I love going into a situation where I can't remember the person's name that I'm speaking to. And for me, my point of, I would say, authority is this networking and communication with individuals and building a network. But there are so many times where I walk up to someone and say, you know, I've seen you like 10 times in the past month. And I can genuinely say, I don't remember your name. And that's entirely my fault. And I'll always get a laugh. I'll always hear them say, oh my God, are you serious? It's, you know, whatever. And then we have this fun story that just lives between that person and myself. And I think everyone should have the I guess not even so much the bravery, but the curiosity attached to building those moments.
I think that's really that's a great example. And honestly, can I steal this from you? Because I'm in that situation all the time.
No,
Oh
please.
yeah.
Thank you.
But listen, I think in terms of understanding what a jazz musician is, there's the good, right? That's the improvisation. There's the bad, that's the economic situation. But there's also a unique kind of human characteristic that is you take weird and unique situations and make them, I would almost even say, a form of entertainment, right? The Ella Fitzgerald made something that was, by all accounts, on more of like a classical standpoint, a horrible situation, and it got her 2 Grammys. That is a wonderful turnaround that I think more people need to embrace. Do you, by chance, have a favorite fuck up?
One of my fuck ups?
Yeah.
Oh, man, let me think. So a couple years back, I was just getting ready for a gig, and I cleaned up, after dinner, was ready to leave the house, and I decided to wash the glasses, like to clean the glasses in the sink, and a wine glass broke, and it cut into my pointer finger of my right hand. So it went pretty deep, a lot of blood, a lot of drama. Gig was canceled. I was brought to the hospital, and I was like, man, this is now my career is over. This is it. A 9-fingered pianist. This is not going to work out. And so they stitched me back together, and they gave me this cask thing, which wasn't really a cask, but it was so I had a really, really big pointer finger. And I could kind of use the other four fingers on the right hand. And I had a couple of gigs lined up after that. So I was like, man, let's try to see if I can play them. So um I try to get into practicing a little bit with these nine fingers. And I also played a couple of gigs. And what was super interesting for me is that I sounded much fresher than before because I couldn't rely on that muscle memory anymore, right? Because I had to find a new way, because I had to figure out new things that I could play. So actually, that opened up a whole new world to me. My left hand got a lot stronger because I was using it a lot more. So that might have been one of my favorite fuck ups in retrospect in terms of like, I thought this was a disaster, but actually, this was pretty good for me because it also changed the way I thought about playing. And I thought about, and this is very technical now in jazz, but I thought about building lines, right? The way I use my fingers after another and where can I go? It was a bit like there was a new part of the brain unlocked that wanted to go a different way.
Oh la 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 la. Oh la la. Wow. So that's the, when you transform something that looks like a disaster into something that's meaningful, that brings meaning, that you take it and then you do something even better than if it didn't happen. That's really the most the the master skill maybe of life. Uh, that's
Possibly, quite possibly.
Listen, I'd agree on that.
We got it all figured out now in this podcast. We can, yeah.
See, now we're selling this episode. It's not free anymore.
Oh, Andy, there is a question that I wanted to ask you when you told us that you had a background in business. Does it give you an edge to do what you do?
I do not, honestly, I don't think it gives me an edge in playing. But it might give me, maybe a little edge in organizing everything around it, right? Um, it it makes me sleep well at night due to the economic situation of jazz musicians aforementioned. So that's certainly a benefit. Um, and I think it's a great overall skill, right, to have. For particularly the playing, I don't think you need a business degree. I don't even think you need university. The guys back in the days, they didn't go to school, right? They just listened to their favorite albums over and over again, and they got together and they played. And yeah, that is it. Jazz was born on the streets, and now it became an academic realm. But you certainly do not need a business degree.
So you don't need any business knowledge to play, but if you do have it, you might secure better jobs. You might find different ways maybe to put your skills on the market and earn
That's right.
more money with it.
That's right. I mean, so very few musicians, yeah, and I think this is what it's like in sports as well. Very few musicians can earn their income with just playing their instrument. It just doesn't really exist anymore, and it's like this classic, top 1% kind of thing. So as a musician nowadays, you want to have a broader spectrum that you can offer, right? Some people teach. Some people get into music business and work in a label. Some people um, run jazz programs at universities, right? So they're on the administrative side of things. And this is certainly something, I think certainly the business background helps with being a lot broader than just, this is something I'm saying with the utmost respect, than just performing.
In the spirit of kind of developing skills, Jeff and I started this podcast because we were both fascinated with other people and other ways of thinking in other careers. And we found that a lot of our really formative lessons came from all over. So what we'd like to do is we'd like to make sure that the people listening to us, people who are in career transitions or students or coming from a place where they really have this need to know about other people and learn from other people, can come away from our podcast with something specifically for them. Now, I know we talked a lot about different skills and different lessons and different ways of thinking, but is there one in particular that you can think of that would be really useful coming from a jazz musician, educator, and someone who was formerly in the corporate life to help those people who are either building their careers right now or just starting? Just one skill that they can take away from your experience that might help them out.
What I had wished to known sooner is how important it is to build a network and have advocates. We all think that, when we deliver, that's where we're gonna, get the promotion, or that's where we're gonna sell, or that's where we're gonna make it work, or whatever. Um, and sometimes we forget to build this network. And in jazz, your network is everything, right? It is probably more important than in business, because I am not going to earn any dollar if I'm not on a list of people that might want to call me. And it doesn't need to be only one person, it needs to be multiple persons, right? And I think this is a skill that is super critical, and we can't start early enough to build this network.
I love it when networking is the answer.
You seem like a good networker. Am I right?
See, I hope so. I like to think so, but there's always room for improvement.
Oh yeah, networking is it's a common thread that runs in most of the episodes of this podcast. So I'm very surprised, Andy, that you came with it like just like that. I didn't expect it. It seemed to be wow, all the networking again. So that whatever you do, networking seems to be the the most important and valuable thing that you should develop.
The great thing about networking in jazz is that actually it's a lot of fun to network in jazz, because that's why they do jam sessions, right? That's when you just, you go to a place on a Monday night, have a beer or two, you just play with a couple of people, you hang out. That's the kind of networking I like.
It sounds very fun.
Fair.
Wow. Andy, thank you so much. Now I would like to ask you our special question. It's a question that we ask all of our guests. It's a special 2 minutes during which I will give you a magic microphone. And this magic microphone enable you to speak to everyone on Earth who are living today, but also all the people of the future generations. They will have access to this 2 minutes message from you. What is it?
We solved the question already, right? Didn't we before? I mean, the answer to all problems. But coming from a life and a career that has a lot to do with improvising, I get really mad when I see people that are stuck where they want to be in their routines, or in their, it could be anything. It could be anything in their job, in their whatever. And I just don't think that life has to be a series of routines that you actually don't want to do. So I just want to encourage everybody to improvise, get out there, take the first step, see where this is going to go, take the next step. It might not lead you where you thought it leads you, but it leads you somewhere. and people are going to grow during that process. And it, I mean, in the TED Talk, I coined it, hey, why not just unleash your inner jazz musician? Um, and I think with a little bit of that mindset, maybe there'd be a little bit of more movement and a little bit more joy.
Incredible. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been such an eye-opening conversation. But even on top of that, it was fun and it was useful. And I think all of our viewers are going to get something really, really great out of this. So thank you again. Ladies and gentlemen out there, if you're listening, like, share, subscribe, do all the things, push all the buttons, improvise a little bit if you'd like on that. But make sure you send it to a friend. And remember, mistakes, they're not that important. Just have fun and enjoy your improvisations the way life was supposed to be enjoyed. Thank you guys so much, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.